Next up, we have a panel on securing secrets inside the privacy infrastructure. And to kick that off, I would like to welcome to the stage Crypto Marina, Head of Growth at Waku. Thank you.
Oh, I will be alone?
Yeah, you have to introduce everyone.
Oh, sure. Can't see the names, I'm sorry.
I think they know who they are.
I would like to invite to the stage my fellow colleague, Developer Relationships at Waku. Alex Zaidelson, CEO of Secret Network. Haischel Dabian, co-founder of Obscura. I hope I pronounce it well. I'm sorry for that. And Oliver Gale, co-founder and CEO of Panther Protocol. Let's wait. Is he coming? Okay, I think.
Yes, all right. Hey, Oliver.
There should be another microphone somewhere there.
You can share.
Sharing is caring.
There's one. Hello.
So thank you for having us here today, and I'm happy to moderate this panel alongside such a bright minds. So let's start from short intros. Please tell the audience who are you, what you do, and what your company do. Let's start from Alex.
Thanks, Marina. I'm Alex. I'm CEO of Secret Labs. We're developing the Secret Network. Secret Network is probably one of the older confidential computing networks. We're using trusted execution environment technology for protecting all the user data, so all the contract execution is confidential, the state is confidential. We are part of the Cosmos ecosystem, easily interacting with other Cosmos chains, and now we're also building out our EVM developer toolkit, which allows EVM developers to use confidential computing features seamlessly. That's us.
That's wonderful. By the way, Waku had spaces with Secret Network a couple of weeks ago, so if you guys want to hear it, you can find it on Twitter. So what about you?
Hi, everyone. I'm Oliver. I'm CEO, co-founder of Panther. We're building a privacy primitive for EVM-compatible chains. The simplest way to describe it is Tornado Cash with compliance wrappers around it and an ability to route transactions into any third-party smart contract, execute and return the output to the protocol.
Exciting.
Hey all, I'm Guru. I'm one of the co-contributors of the Waku project, and I'm focusing more on developer relations. But a one-liner about Waku, I would say it's a Tornado Cash, but for data.
Hi. Hi, I'm Haischel Dabian. I'm co-founder of Obscura. We're working on a marketplace for confidential data services, so primarily building tools on ZK-based chains, focus on making data more accessible, whether it's on-chain, off-chain, or cross-chain.
Great, thank you for this intro, guys. So as thought leaders of the privacy tech world, I would say, I would like to start this conversation from the question, what is, in your opinion, happening? Are we heading towards a dystopian future where privacy is a relic in the past, or can we still reclaim our digital autonomy? Who would like to take this one?
Sorry, I didn't understand the question.
Are we heading into a dystopian future where privacy not exist anymore, or we still can claim our digital autonomy?
So yeah, my prediction would be that we will claim our digital autonomy. If you look at in the past what happened with regards to cryptographic technologies, we had an era or comparable with HTTP, where we first had HTTP and then we had HTTPS. When HTTPS first came along, there was a lot of resistance with the technology, whereas now it's essentially mandatory in all governmental websites. So that transition is what I see also happening to privacy tech. I do think that there's a lack of understanding of the benefits and how to apply it in a correct manner. But once, yeah, that becomes general knowledge, I see it being adopted. But we do have to go through that, yeah, that valley of death as we're going to right now.
I think I can add to this. I think this event is an excellent example to show that privacy tech is definitely progressing forward. And there's a huge misconception in Web3 that we think Web3 is all about blockchains, but Web3 is a set of ethos. It's about privacy, censorship resistance, and a lot of other ethos that culminate together to form what Web3 it is today. So yeah, I think it's definitely progressing, but the technology sector as a whole also progresses forward with multiple things like brain-computer interface, AI, and a lot of data harvesting methods coming up. So yeah, I'm excited to know more about the privacy tech projects, and it's definitely progressing.
You wanted to say something as well, Alex?
Yeah, sure. So I actually think that privacy or confidential computing is inevitable. And right now, I think we're witnessing like the second coming of confidential computing or privacy technologies, right? The first coming was in 2014 to 17 with Monero, Zcash, other projects. I was also involved in Beam, which was a layer 1 privacy chain. But these very dedicated privacy coin projects didn't really succeed hugely. They didn't replace the others, mostly probably because they were isolated and didn't have confidential computing, like any smart contracts execution. So I think right now, as the industry kind of matures, although, I mean, I'm telling it to everyone, all of our blockchain industry is smaller than Microsoft, one company, right? The market cap. So it's kind of still very, very young, very small. But now the bigger players start to look at blockchain to see how they can leverage it, how they can make money. And big companies cannot operate in radically transparent environment, right? They don't want others to see their trades. They don't want others to see their data. So the privacy technologies are growing now. And we see the number of projects here, and there are a lot more projects that are, not on those billboards here. A lot of people realize that I think the privacy industry also kind of matured in a way that there is still this will for human rights and privacy, but there's also an understanding that we need to live in this environment that exists and that we need to somehow comply with what the governments require, because we cannot live like in constant fight. So I'm very bullish on privacy technologies or confidential computing. We're actually now driving, together with a lot of projects who are here, we're driving kind of a rebrand of part of the technology to decentralized confidential computing, DCC. Oasis is part of that, and some other companies, Secret as well, just for better understanding. So yeah, bottom line, very bullish, and even my statement is that privacy is inevitable. Without it, we won't see blockchain get real mass adoption.
Well, I'm so glad to see that everyone's so positive about it. I'm personally very positive about it too. And actually, by recent reports, privacy concerns are raising, especially in US, but not only, of course. And I think the worse governments became, the worse the treatment of the government become, the better it is for our sector. And as we see, it's just getting worse and worse. So there are high chances that people will realize it faster than we predicted. And also, even you can already judge by the size of the conferences. If before it was just a small group of cyber anarchists, right now we have such huge events such as ETHDam and others, which collect in hundreds of people interested into privacy and willing to hack for the future, for build a better internet. So talking about building, actually, what do you think ethical consideration should the developers keep in mind when actually building the privacy technologies, privacy infrastructures?
Yeah, I'll start with that one. I think the first thing developers will be conscious of and teams that are building technology are really the regulatory and legal environment that surround us at this time, which is fraught with uncertainty and risk, which is just not well defined. So I think before we even talk about the ethics of building, there's this security and personal sovereignty consideration that builders have to take into account. And the generally accepted way in which you can build technology and mitigate that risk is to decentralize it, to open source it, and to distance oneself from operating that technology. And so I think, fortunately, when you look at ethically the optimal outcome, it is to make technology open source. It is to separate oneself from the governance and the operation of that technology. So there's this convergence between personal safety and the ethics of creating an open economy.
Absolutely. That's actually our vision as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely. That's what we think Waku stands for. I think there's a lot of pain points surrounding the privacy sector in terms of development. And that is what we are trying to solve at this point, just making the whole process frictionless. But yeah, we stand for the cypherpunk dream, and we stand for what Ethereum white paper was. It was in 2011. We still stand for the same vision. We still stand for the same cypherpunk dream.
Do you want to add something on this one?
I find it a tough question to answer. Once you are questioning things like ethics, because it's very broad, right? Like what ethics, from where, from what time. So it's very subjective in some sense. I think ultimately what you would want is to build tools that empower your users while protecting them. And that's what I see privacy being a middle for. So I guess that's the only thing I have to add to that.
Well, actually what I meant by the question is what, like we have kind of issue actually on the market where some startups and companies claiming that they are doing privacy protection when they are not doing that, but they are really great in marketing, you know, and that's and that's unethical. Even Web2 companies doing that, and we know that WhatsApp doesn't have anything to do with privacy, but people still believe somehow that those messages are encrypted. That's so funny. So yeah, I personally think that decentralization should be a must, and so do open source. And privacy should be by design. And while we're talking about privacy by design, what do you think, is the concept of privacy by design achievable in our current technological landscape, or it's merely a lofty ideal?
I can start. Well, whether we like it or not, the dominant blockchain technologies are radically transparent, right? Bitcoin, Ethereum, all the Ethereum derivatives, Solana, Cosmos in general. So I think replacing those technologies with something new seems to be kind of utopian right now. And by the way, I think that it may be kind of, you know, some of us feel that, you know, this radical transparency is kind of a bug, or like a problem that, you know, Satoshi did not solve. But on the other hand, I'm thinking that if Bitcoin were confidential, were totally private in the beginning, maybe the governments just would have strangled it or tried to strangle it really, really hard right from the get-go, right? Because that would be seen as a huge threat. So maybe we're actually lucky that all the blockchains started like this. So what I'm saying is that I don't think we can replace the existing technology altogether, but we can build add-ons to make all the ecosystem more secure. So we should probably still be using and will be using the non-confidential blockchains as the main technology, but we will add things that provide data protection, privacy, confidential computing on top of that and create like additional layers. Like at Secret, we're calling this a confidential execution layer, and we're offering developers running on any chain to just store some confidential data with us or do some confidential computation. I think Panther is doing something very similar, right? Running on top of EVM, allowing some privacy, and other projects as well. So my belief is that privacy was not baked into the original blockchain technology. So it's kind of like an afterthought, but there are so many different ways to build it and so many bright people working on that, so that in the end we will have a diverse ecosystem of solutions that will allow good and seamless privacy to all the users, and that will drive adoption.
That sounds great.
Yeah, and you're correct in the sense that we are looking at multiple different L1 and L2s and essentially the emerging roll-up ecosystem and saying each of these chains is configured differently. They have different use cases, and every user and institution themselves has a different level of, a different need for privacy. And privacy obviously comes with a cost, and it exists on a spectrum. And so the idea of absolute privacy is, I don't think that exists. Even cryptography has a lifespan, and so encryption has a lifespan. So, the question really is, what's the use case? What is an acceptable level of privacy, statistically speaking? And then how do you deliver that to the users, whether they're end users or institutional users? And so, I think broadly it's a heterogeneous marketplace, and we have more options than ever. And so users will coalesce around the services that they need and that meet their requirements, and where costs, essentially supply and demand, meet up. And so we're looking at the DeFi markets, particularly the finance markets, and saying, look, 96% of the market caps of all cryptos are on pseudonymous chains, to your point. And so do we think those network effects are going to be overcome by fully private systems? I mean, probably not, actually. I think it will be a case of, certainly there are other players who will take market share and serve niche cases, but the objective from our perspective is to bring that tool in and the ability to have some level of statistical privacy to any chain, any solution.
Guys, would you agree that privacy by default is not possible?
I would say that's the beauty of Web3. In the initial days, just like the others mentioned, there was not much of advocacy in blockchain because blockchain was supposed to be transparent. But then over the years, exploring all these use cases, I think we've found the need for blockchain, and there are so many projects, amazing projects coming up. And that's the beauty of blockchain that I personally find.
Yeah, to add to that, I think so privacy, we use it as like this umbrella term, but you can dissect it into many different versions. So you have input privacy, output privacy, privacy of your users, privacy of function. And I think to add to the point that everyone else essentially made is we'll have a diverse ecosystems of different networks that contribute to the use case of the user. So with that in mind, yeah, I do see the different benefits of the different networks being combined together, where a user doesn't really need to think about it, but it's baked into the system entirely. So that's my point on top.
Yeah, just to add a bit more to it, like I don't see much of Web 2 projects doing, giving custody of your data or your access control to your users. But with Web3, I think it's more principle-driven. I can see a lot of projects doing it. So I think that's like the unique selling point for this whole, Web3 domain.
That's curious. What about the actually metadata protection? I mean, there are startups out there, I'm not going to tell names, not to market them, that claim that can actually provide better encryption than Tor does, that you can actually decrypt behavior patterns in Tor, and by protecting metadata, you cannot. So it does make it possible doing privacy by default in this case. So could it be like an option, this, or perhaps you have other options in your mind that this way we can ensure that privacy infrastructures are resistant to surveillance and censorship?
Maybe I can start. So you mentioned Tor, and I guess you alluded to NIM and other projects doing this. I have kind of a controversial view on that. Today, most of the internet is like, what, 3, 4 companies, right? So you always go to Google, the older guys go to Facebook, the younger guys go to whatever the young guys go to, like Instagram. So the metadata is very simple, right? You go to Google, you go to Facebook, you go to Instagram, right? And that's pretty much 90% of everything we're doing. So the real problem is not the metadata, I think, but the data, right? So, using Tor to hide the fact that I went to Google, well, it's obvious anyway, but the problem is that Google knows exactly what I'm looking for. And OpenAI, more so right now, knows everything I'm interested in, right? And to me, the data is a much bigger problem than the metadata, just because the internet kind of shrinked to just a handful of companies who have all the traffic and all the user information. So that's my take. That said, of course, the task of hiding metadata is a noble task. I used to run a Tor node at home for some time. It's a lot of fun looking at the logs, trying to understand what people are doing. But I could. So that's my answer.
What are your thoughts on this? Can metadata protection save us from surveillance?
Can metadata protection save us from surveillance? In some ways, I guess. It makes it a lot harder if you can't track it. But I think I want to reply to his point, because it also taps into the users. Like, now we're freely giving out the data, right? Everyone's just posting, publishing their whole lives online. Users don't really care about privacy at this moment. So it's like our responsibility to, implement it and bring it to them by building systems of value to them, which is extremely hard. So I think that's probably the first thing. We have to start building things of real value in the real world, because currently in this space, it still feels like a sandbox environment. There are no real-world applications. There are no real-world implications. So if we want to get this to the users, we have to build systems of value with privacy baked in, because they don't care themselves.
Yeah, I think data harvesting is definitely going to be a big thing in the coming years with technologies like AI and brain-computer interface coming up, because you recursively trained your models with this data. And let's say a centralized LLM like OpenAI, they have data associated with these identities as well. Like OpenAI knows who is searching for this particular question, or who is trying to, what prompts you are going to send to their LLM. I think this is where we have the biggest privacy risk. If they try to use this harvested data for mass surveillance or mass advertising.
They are already doing it, man. They are doing it now as we speak. It's not like they tried. They have the data. They're using it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that's where technologies like pro-privacy technologies can step in and be like, take the data, not the identity. And I think especially for Waku, it's a good use case, because we make sure that the data is getting to the hands of the right person without knowing the identity of the sender or the receiver.
I look at this as I'm not a believer. Let me put it this way. When I got into the privacy space, well, I guess it started years ago with Darkcoin, but with Panther, it was ideologically driven by the idea that our right to privacy is a fundamental human freedom and we need to defend that. But it's been a 4-year journey, and I'm quite confident in sort of attesting to the fact that that's not really what users care about. They care about utility, and economic drivers make the world go round. I mean, this entire space is built on the principles of rational individuals, profit maximizing. And so when we're designing products, what we really have to think about is what's the utility function for the user. And I think the biggest hope here is in self-custodying data and being able to monetize it, or access services otherwise. So when I break down something like access to a financial service in the real world to first principles, what I'm essentially being asked to do is trade my data, i.e. my KYC, for access to a network which is useful for me. And that's the transaction I'm willing to make. Similarly, when I access social media, the trade here is I give up rights to some of my personal data in order to interact socially with other people. And so what we have to do as builders is really figure out whose problem are we solving and how we entice the user to enter into this data exchange transaction. And I think even in the case of LLMs, there's a huge wave now of intellectual property rights enforcements. And OpenAI sort of rolled out and scraped a whole bunch of information off of the internet without permission. Now they're rolling back those access controls because companies are saying, hey, this is our proprietary information. We have the right to monetize it. If you want to access it, pay us for it in some form. And so this is where, as a privacy service provider, we get to insert ourselves into the equation and say, right, here's some infrastructure to protect that data and access control its release.
And I think to add to that, I think that the systems that we will be able to create that flips the switch where the user now has to grant access to the service that needs the data, that is where a lot of the value lies. That is still untapped in the current Web 2 framework. So by leveraging privacy as a feature in what we're building to really reap of the benefits of Web 3, I think those are the things that will be the driving force behind it.
Yeah, you've been mentioning here one of the challenges is people still do not care about the privacy. I think a mission and a task and a goal of each startup who actually work in the privacy protection should be also education, as much as education as possible, to actually teach people that it's not about that they have nothing to hide, but they have a right to choose what they can hide and what they can share, which same in your, let's say, offline life. And make sure that it's accessible to everyone. So the question is how we can assure that the privacy infrastructure is accessible and to everyone and doesn't depend on their social economical status.
Decentralize sufficiently. This goes back to the challenge that builders have. Sufficiently decentralize. It's, I think, former SEC chair, prior to the famous Gary Gensler, made this statement as it related to Ethereum and said that Ethereum was sufficiently decentralized, but that's never been defined. And so we operate in this limbo of not really understanding. Certainly in the US, you have constitutional rights to freedom of speech, and the right to privacy is the inverse. The right to say nothing is the inverse of saying something. And so two sides of the same coin. And so, I think we sit in a situation where what constitutes decentralization is unknown, but there are these principles. So open sourcing your code base, your documentation is a great starting point. Not having ownership keys or having a sufficiently large set of key managers or owners when it comes to smart contract implementation. Because, of course, there's two sides to that coin as well. If your smart contracts are immutable and they're flawed, there's a massive risk to users. On the other hand, if you have some nexus of control, then you're not operating independently, and so you're subjected to the will of authorities who may have malicious intents, which tends to happen. So, I think it comes down to really figuring out the paradigm for how to build responsibly and publish your research and your code and your systems responsibly, and then ideally step away from them. Because if they're useful, the market will do the rest.
We don't have time, but if you...
Yeah, I want to add, so Oliver, you attacked it like from the developer standpoint, how developers and scientists and researchers should behave. I think to make privacy available, we first need to really make blockchain technology available and easy to use to everyone, right? Because right now it's still used by, like, most people use it like very little, and so they don't care about the price. Oh, okay, I bought a coin and then I want to sell it, when it makes 10x. I don't care if everybody knows about that because it's a very small part of our lives, of my life in this case, right? But when institutions start trading on the blockchain and taking big positions and potentially moving the market, then they understand that they need privacy. So what I'm saying is, as we build more utility, and DeFi is a huge utility, right? Because you can make money, and it's happening, it's real. But as we build more utility, like payroll applications, banking applications, games, whatever, and more people come in, then they will demand privacy. Moreover, the applications will be impossible without the privacy. So what I'm saying is, we here are building confidential computing solutions, privacy solutions that are getting ready, but they will become really used only when more people come, and that will happen hopefully in this cycle as we have better user experience with account abstraction and all the other things that make everything easier. So once it's easy and a lot of people come, then when 50% of my life is on blockchain, or 90% of my financial stuff is on the blockchain, then I, as a user, will just demand this privacy, and it will be there, right? But if it's only 1%, then really I don't care. And that's the fundamental problem. I think the technology is there. We still all have a lot of work to do, but the ideas are there, technology is there, but the adoption of the blockchain is what will really make this privacy available and used by everyone.
Thank you so much for this amazing closing note. We unfortunately already 2 minutes late, so... The question is if Facebook sold data to Netflix?
Well, there wasn't any privacy anyway, right? So Facebook had all the user data, and like one huge behemoth sold it to another huge behemoth. So I don't think most of the people, even care, because they gave their data away to some other guys anyway, right? So I mean, they may be pissed off because they didn't get paid for that, but still, it's not like it's not like it was published, right? It was just sold to another Netflix, and for me, like Netflix and Facebook, it's kind of the same. I mean, okay, it's another guy in another suit running this company, but it's like two huge companies and sitting in the same place.
Not really surprising, indeed. Any other questions from the audience? I guess it's a no. Well, thank you so much, guys, for sharing this super interesting.
Thank you very much.